everyone. I'm Jayne Spooner, and I'm a University of Minnesota Master Gardener here in Rice County. And today we're here to talk about dirt. And we have come down to the Rice County Fairgrounds, and we are currently standing in the Rice County Master Gardeners teaching gardens that they've maintained for approximately 9 years now. And every year during the fair, they come down and they staff the garden. They give garden tours, they do some demonstrations, and they answer questions and hand out information of pertinent garden topics that are happening. So I thought, we're gonna get the dirt on dirt today, and so I invited a special guest today. She's also a fellow Master Gardener here in Rice County. I have a lot of respect for this woman. She went back to college, and she's now a PhD soil scientist for the University of Minnesota. So let's welcome Anne Sawyer to What's Growin On.
Thank you, Jayne. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and just quickly, and then we'll move on to what's in the dirt.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, I am technically a PhD in soil science, although in my job with Extension, that's not what I spend most of my time doing. I actually work in on-farm food safety for horticulture. So essentially what that means is that I help growers to implement practices to reduce foodborne illness in produce. So if you've heard about the E. coli outbreak in romaine and that kind of stuff, believe it or not, we have a lot of produce growers in Minnesota, and so I work with growers all across the state, everybody from school gardens up to big commercial growers to help them keep our food safe. So I love it. It's great. And I dabble in soil still. I still do work with Master Gardeners for soil and homeowners for soil, but mostly I spend my time with the food safety.
So now you live in Northfield, and you do live on a small hobby farm?
I do have a small hobby farm.
Okay. Do you do any commercial vegetable growing?
We used to, but with both of us working full time and my husband in school and a little guy, it's just
Definitely.
and chickens and too much.
Yeah, I get that. So as I was doing research for this, and we had talked before, I'd written a small article on dirt for the Daily News. That's another little thing I do, but you and Julie Weisenhorn had written a paper called Living Soil, Healthy Garden, and it was chock full of information. So let's start talking about what's in dirt. What actually is the makeup of dirt, and what's living in there, what's dead in there, and what's going on underneath our feet?
All right, so we're standing on a bunch of mulch right now, but mulch is actually a really good tool to help moderate the soil. So the reason you care about something like soil temperature and soil moisture is because soil is really alive. So soil is made up of minerals, and between the minerals, there's air and water, and then we have what we call organic matter. So when I say minerals, I'm referring to things that are sand, silt, and clay. And soil scientists define those according to how big they are. So sand, we know what sand is. We can feel sand. It's gritty. It's what's on the beach. Silt are particles that are smaller than sand. We can just barely see silt particles with our naked eye. And then clay is microscopic. We can't see a single piece of clay with our eyes, but we can feel it. It feels like clay, like modeling clay. Yeah. And so the combination of sand, silt, and clay gives your soil different characteristics that as gardeners, you can probably identify just by feeling and just by the way that your water moves through the soil. So soils that have a lot of sand, the water tends to move through, it drains really well. Soils that have a lot of clay, they're heavy, they don't drain so well, but they hold a lot of nutrients. Okay. Clay is the tininess of the particle, and the chemistry of it makes it really reactive, and it holds plant nutrients and it holds water, does a lot of good things. So you want a nice combination of the sand, silt, and clay to get the best characteristics in your soil. Okay. But if you don't have that, there are things that you can do also. Okay. Soil testing is one of those. Okay, so let's get to the soil testing. So, I get a lot of questions about why did my tomato plant fail? I get the flower things because you do a lot of container stuff and that, but I do get a lot of questions about success in your garden. Not that you don't need healthy soil for your flowers and your perennial beds, but we're starting to see a really big uptick in people wanting that homegrown food on their table. They want to teach their kids to eat it, and so they're getting them involved in gardening. So, what as a gardener would you recommend to be the very best thing to do before you start gardening? Number one thing is to get a soil test. There are a lot of reasons why you want to do this. Part of it is because plants like us, they need nutrients, and they get a lot of nutrients from the soil, but sometimes your soil needs more nutrients than what's just in there, and you can supply fertilizers, right? You can buy fertilizers. But unless you know what your soil needs, you can often end up either spending too much or putting on the wrong stuff, or sometimes even damaging your plants. And
basically you can actually overdo
it, or you can put on the wrong stuff.
Okay.
And too much fertilizer can be not only bad for plants, it can be expensive, but it can also hurt the environment, and it can hurt your soil.
Yep, and I guess as you all know, that if you put it in the ground, it's going to eventually go somewhere, and eventually it ends up in our streams and our rivers, so you have to be really cautious as far as what you're putting in. So soil testing, what is the best route for a person to go and get their soil tested?
So the best thing to do is to sample your soil, which we'll talk about in a second, and then to send it into a laboratory for analysis. Okay. And you can buy soil test kits at big box stores and things like that, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend using your money to get a real analysis from a laboratory. And the reason why is because the tests that they do in the laboratory are designed to work with the soils that we have in Minnesota. And also, for the University of Minnesota, they have a soil testing laboratory. That's the one I know the best, so that's what I'm going to talk about. But for $17, you can get a basic soil test, which will give you a lot of really important information. It'll tell you about the organic matter in your soil, which we didn't quite talk about, we'll get to. And it'll tell you your soil pH, which is really important for how nutrients move to plants. It'll give you your phosphorus, potassium, and a recommendation for those, as well as for nitrogen, which are the biggest nutrients that your plants take up.
So that's the NPK that you always see on
the fertilizers.
Fertilizer boxes that you see on the shelf.
And most importantly, it's going to give you recommendations for fertilizer and also for lime if you need to change your pH. And it's going to be based on the soil that you send in, as well as the plants that you want to grow. And you're not going to get that from a kit that you buy at the store.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know about the plants that you were growing.
Absolutely.
I knew about the soil testing, and I was reading some self-help things on the internet, and there was one lady that was really frustrated with a home soil testing kit because she kept adding and kept retesting, and I'm like going, ooh, lady, I just want to reach out to you and go to your university extension and have it soil tested. So,
Absolutely.
So anyway, so basically this is a really easy way for a home gardener to do it. So maybe you can demonstrate and show us what we need to do.
Sure, I can do that. So the one thing to remember when you're sampling your soil is that no matter how good the laboratory analysis is, it's only as good as the sample that you send. So you need to take a sample that's really representative of the area that you're growing in. So you're not just going to want to dig in one spot, because that's only going to tell you about this one spot. So you're going to want to take several samples throughout the area that you want an analysis for.
So do you need separate bags for that, or do you just put that all in one bag?
You're going to want a bucket, and you're going to want a shovel or a trowel, and then you're also going to want some kind of a bag to put your final sample in. This happens to be a bag from the soil testing lab, but you don't need this. You can just use a plastic Ziploc or something. Okay. That's fine. Right. You're going to need to send in about 2 to 3 cups of soil, but that'll be easy to get when we take lots of samples around the area.
Okay.
The one thing I will say is that if you have a really big garden where things are different in one area and they just grow differently in one area than another, you might want to sample those 2 separately and send in 2 samples.
Okay.
If you're sampling your lawn would be a sample, and then your garden would maybe be another sample.
So you would basically test, if you were having a vegetable garden, you would do your vegetable garden area. If you had a perennial bed, you would do that area. Say you have like a bank of trees like this, you'd want to test that separately as well.
If you notice that things grow differently in that area, then yes, do that separately. And you want to probably test about every 2 to 3 years, depending upon your results. If you have to make big changes, you might want to test more often. But otherwise, 3 years is probably adequate.
Okay.
So all right.
Let's get digging here. So
let's take a sample.
Okay.
So when you're taking a soil sample, the first thing you're going to want to do is to get rid of all of the stuff on top that's not soil. So in this garden, we have a whole bunch of mulch on top, and this isn't going to tell us anything about our soil, so we want to scrape all that off. Now, if you were in your lawn, you would want to scrape off whatever grass debris is on top, and then a little bit of the turf grass on the top to get right down to the soil. This garden is very well mulched. And so then when we get to the top of the soil, we're going to start just to dig a hole. And we're going to dig down about 6 inches. There's a lot of roots in here. It's perennial. Got some perennials in here, so we got some roots.
You got Mr. Worm there too.
Yeah, and yeah, worms, that's good. Worms are a sign of a healthy soil, so we're happy about that. Okay, so now I've got my hole, and my hole is about 6 inches deep. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sample a slice of the hole. So I'm gonna just take a sliver down the side to try to get a profile of soil that will sample the whole thing from the top to the bottom of those 6 inches. I don't want to get too much from the top and too much from the bottom, because then I'm not getting a nice representation of what the plants are getting. I want to try to sample that whole area that the plants are getting. So there's kind of my slice that I took out of the side, and I'll put that in my bucket, my nice clean plastic bucket. And then I will repeat this maybe about 8 to 10 times in the area. Okay. But because our soil's kind of wet today, we're not going to do that. I just want to show you how to do one. But when you're doing it at home, you'll take several more and put them all in this bucket. And then you'll mix them together, get them nice and mixed up. So you're really getting a representative sample. And then you put about 2 cups in your plastic bag, or in this bag. Your extension office should have some of these bags on hand. They usually do. And then you just dump it in there, and you can send it to the soil testing lab on the St. Paul campus. You can also look that up on Google. Yep. You can look up their address.
Actually, I have this posted for you guys at the end of this video today, so we'll make sure that information is out there too.
And so you're going to send this in, but you're also going to send in a form, which I have, so I can show you how you can fill the form out a little bit. And then your name, address, and you're going to want to name your samples so that if you send in more than one, you know which is which. Make sure that you remember what you called them. So if you have one for the garden, one for the lawn, remember what you call them. And then they'll send you back an analysis in about 7 to 10 days. Unless they're really busy, it could take a little longer, but usually that's their turnaround time. Yep. And then you'll know how to fertilize your garden.
Okay, great. So as long as we have this dug up here, let's take a good look. And let's talk about what's in it, the organic stuff that's in it. We did see a little worm in there. Let's talk about the organic makeup of it.
Yeah, so this is when I was here when we first put this garden in, and the soil was not nearly this nice. It was not nearly this dark. I was skeptical that we were going to get the results that we did, frankly.
Well, hey, yeah. So obviously you guys are doing something right.
Yeah, so the reason why the soil is nice and dark is because it probably has a lot of organic matter in it. And soil organic matter, it makes up only a small portion of the soil. So, I was saying that the minerals, the sand, the silt, and clay, is probably about half of the soil. And then maybe 20% air, 25% water in between those minerals. And then there's this organic matter. And that's what makes the soil look dark. And so organic matter is essentially made up of like the organisms like bacteria and fungi and protozoa and our little earthworm friend here, and plant roots that live in the soil, and all of these organisms that break down plant material, or when things die and they get broken down by fungus and bacteria, then they end up becoming the soil organic matter. And the soil organic matter holds those particles together. It holds the sand, silt, and clay together. It holds water and air, and it provides nutrients for your plants. So soil organic matter is incredibly important. And as gardeners, if you do nothing else, even if you don't do a soil test, which I highly recommend you do, but if you do nothing else, add organic materials to your soil. That really is the best thing you can do. Feed your microorganisms, feed your bacteria.
So when you talk about that, adding that, what kinds of, explain to our viewers here what types of things you can add. Just leaves, twigs, do you put...
Compost.
Compost, okay.
Compost is a really good thing to add. Even, if you can put an inch or two of compost in your garden and turn that in, that'd be really good for your soil. Okay. If you have access to manure or composted manure, those are good things too. Okay. Just be careful in a vegetable garden. I have to wear my food safety hat.
Absolutely.
If you're applying manure, you need to do it in the fall and then plant the following spring. Don't apply manure in the spring and then plant your lettuce. You could make someone really sick. apply raw manure, anything that might have manure in it in the fall.
Yep.
Only fully composted things in the spring. But yes, that's really, really good for your soil, and it provides all kinds of nutrients for your plants. Although you may still need to supplement the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Okay.
But organic materials, the compost, manure, leaves, all that stuff, grass clippings, will give you a lot of the other nutrients that plants need. So
I would probably want to stress, maybe if you're putting grass clippings on there, it's probably a non-treated grass clipping.
Oh,
yes. But,
Yep, so no herbicides.
No herbicides.
That can be bad.
Yep. So you're kind of defeating the purpose of getting healthy soil there. So
Exactly. Yep, so we can feel, I mean, if you take your soil and kind of rub it together, you can feel whether there's some sand grains in there. There's some sand grains in here. This is a nice loam soil. This is a nice mix of the sand, silt, and clay. Really good for growing plants.
I have to laugh. My father-in-law was a rather ardent vegetable gardener up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And when he came down to visit, he'd right away go out to my vegetable garden, and he'd go and he'd dig, and he goes, "Oh my God, I love your soil, I love your dirt," because he says, I have all clay up there just because of the mining industry up there. So, he did have, really successful vegetable gardens, but it's just kind of a funny thing to sit here and talk about the way this dirt looks, because it was always, every time he'd come down, he'd go out there and dig in the garden. So,
yep, this is pretty nice.
Okay. Here we are now, we're taking a look at filling out the soil testing form, and then Anne's got some results, and she's going to help us interpret them. And again, there'll be a shot of this so that you can take a look at it. So
very briefly, this is a soil testing laboratory form that you can print from their page, or come to the extension office and get one. Basic, your name and address, where you live, because the soils vary around the state, so they want to know where you are. And then the list of your samples. And here's the part where you tell them what it is that you're growing. And this is why the soil test is so valuable, because if you can do fruit trees, small fruits, blueberries, different kinds of trees and shrubs, vegetable gardens, flower gardens, lawns. The regular test, as I said, is $17, and you get a lot of good stuff there. There are additional tests like lead. If you live in an urban area, that could be really helpful if you're concerned, especially with kids.
Yes.
Like sandboxes or soils that they might be digging in. Soluble salts, if you have new soil that's been brought in, sometimes that can be a good idea.
Construction areas,
Yep. So there's a lot of things that they can offer you. So when you get your results back, you will get a soil test report. And on the soil test report, there's a lot of great information. Here they'll give you your estimated texture, so whether it's real heavy and clay rich or light or medium. This is a medium soil for this report. Organic matter, so we talked about what that means, and this is used to determine how much nitrogen you might need in your soil. Organic matter, as it decomposes, provides nitrogen for plants. Let's see, they did a soluble salt test. We're just going to ignore that. That's extra if you want it. The soil pH, which is really important for plants getting nutrients. This thing called a buffer index is a laboratory measurement that's used to help the lab understand how hard it is to change pH. So don't worry about that. That's just something for them to make that recommendation for lime. Then they test for the phosphorus and the potassium, and here we have some numbers for that, and they also give you a graphical depiction so you know if it's low, medium, high, or very high. And they take all this information and they give you a recommendation. So this again is based on the soil and the plants that you're growing. And here it says a lime recommendation is 20 pounds per 100 square feet. So you're going to need to measure your garden and see how big it is. Okay. So you know how much to get. And lime, you can just go to the garden store and buy egg lime. Yeah. That's pretty straightforward. Just weigh it out and then you can spread it in your garden. And then the total amount of each nutrient to apply. So that's again our nitrogen, our phosphorus, and our potassium. So here it says nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. Those are just the forms that they come in. It's a legacy thing. Anyway, so just worry about nitrogen, NP, and the K here. Yep. So nitrogen, it says 0.1 pounds per 100 square feet. Phosphorus is 0.2 pounds per 100 square feet. And so this looks really confusing. So what they do to try to make it a little easier is that they say the approximate ratio or proportion of these nutrients is 15, 20, 30. And those are the numbers that you see on the fertilizer bags when you go to the store. You see these three numbers, so nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. Okay. So I brought just some examples of fertilizers, and we'll start with one of the most common, Miracle-Gro. Miracle-Gro is a great all-purpose fertilizer. It's water soluble, so the plants can take it up right away. It's manufactured to be accessible for plants right away, and to that you can measure it really easily and know how much they're getting. Now on the back is where, on this box, on the back it has those 3 numbers. You have to look kind of hard, but here it's 24, 8, and 16. So on our soil test, we wanted a 15, 20, 30. And this is what's going to happen when you go to the store. You're not going to find the exact numbers.
Okay.
So what do? The most important number to match is the first one, is that nitrogen, because that's usually the one that plants need the most of. So try to match that one. The phosphorus and the potassium, so the middle number, don't go over on the middle number if you can, because that's the one that leads to the algal blooms in our freshwater lakes. So phosphorus, too much phosphorus is bad for the environment. So you want to match the 15, the first number, and then get as close as you can with the others. And so here, this one is a 24. This one is a little bit too rich in nitrogen, so we'd want to try to look for something else. So here we have an 8, 2, and a 4. Yeah, it's a, if we could, that's a 15, 20, 30. I don't think I have the right fertilizer here. So you're going to have to do a little bit of shopping around, and you might even have to think about applying a double rate or a half rate to try to match those numbers. Okay. So those are other things that you can do. Okay. Now there are different kinds of fertilizers. Here I have a couple organic fertilizers, and when I say organic I mean carbon-based. And the difference between the carbon-based organic fertilizers and the manufactured fertilizers, there's a lot of them, but the main thing I want you to know is that the organic fertilizers, the form of the nutrients in here is actually something that needs to be decomposed by the microbes in the soil before the plants can take it up. So chemically it's not available right away. So if you use organic fertilizers, you might not get a very quick growth response from your plants. Okay. So for example, in my container plants, because you water them and the nutrients can leach out with the water, right, I use Miracle-Gro in my container plants. But in my garden, I like to grow more organically, so I will use these organic fertilizers. And in fact, in my garden, I have a lot of phosphorus and potassium already in my soil. So I don't apply that. I'll use this product, which is blood meal. And this is a 1200, again, those 3 numbers. So basically this is just a lot of nitrogen. Yeah. Okay. Along with other stuff, because it's organic, it's from an animal. So we also have a lot of those micronutrients that the plants need, your iron and zinc and that kind of stuff. All right. So fertilizers are a little overwhelming. There's a lot to buy, but doing your soil test and then read the information on the back, because that will also help you.
And I'm assuming that there's a number on there that if you are confused, that they're, the university has always been very helpful. That pick up the phone and call them. They'll talk to you, or come down to the extension office and they'll hook you up with somebody that.
Always ask a master gardener.
Yeah, ask a master gardener, and we'll help you decipher it. Or if we don't know, there's a whole bunch of us here in town, and we'll help you. So. One thing I want to ask you before we finish up here is, I hear a lot of strange things that people are doing in gardens, and some of the strange things I hear, okay, we got Epsom salts. People tell me, oh, you've got to put Epsom salts in when you plant your peppers because it'll make your peppers taste sweeter. Okay, that's a kind of a, it's something to add to my soil, and I don't know if my soil needs it. Coffee grounds, if I want to make it more acidic, people will say put it around your roses. And then eggshells with your tomatoes to help blossom and rot. So just in a quick synopsis is like, we kind of exchanged emails, and I kind of knew you were going, what direction you were going to go with it, but I have to kind of sit back and just like, well, not really. Not really.
So that's the thing. So not really. And there are some things that you could actually potentially do damage too. So you do need to be careful. And I'll start with that, because that's the Epsom salts. So Epsom salts is a magnesium sulfate. And plants do need magnesium in order to be able to grow. It's an essential nutrient. But the thing about the soil we have in Minnesota is that most of it already has plenty of magnesium. You don't need to add anymore. And it's one of these things that, it doesn't accumulate in the soil. Instead, it can actually leach out of the soil and get into the environment. So you need to be careful. Don't add it unless you need magnesium.
Right. And basically, instead of throwing
You
this
don't.
right in your garden,
Yeah.
throw it in your compost
Yeah.
pile. If you're
Yep.
going to home compost, do that. So,
Right.
you know, kind of stay away from them. There's better ways to get your tomatoes from blossom end rot and making your soil acidic and stuff.
Yeah, so blossom end rot, yes, technically it is a calcium deficiency.
Yes.
But it's not because there isn't calcium in the soil. It's because the plant is having problems getting it from the soil into the fruit, and that can be because it's too much moisture or not enough moisture. It's really about the water going through the plant, because the calcium comes with the water. Putting eggshells in, if you've ever composted eggshells, you know that they're probably still going to be there the next year. They don't break down. So if you're trying to get calcium in your soil,
Yeah.
this won't help anyways. So, but it is organic matter. Over time, it will, you know,
decompose.
but it's not going to help with blossom end rot. You're wasting your time.
So there you have it. There's the dirt on dirt. We will be posting again, like I said, the website where to go to get your soil testing kit information. And in Anne's paper, she talks about 6 tips for a healthy soil in your garden. And number 1, number uno, test your soil. Add organic matter, incorporate compost to compacted soil to increase air, water, and nutrients for plants. Protect topsoil with mulch or cover crops. Don't use chemicals unless there's no alternative, and rotate your crops. And this was fabulous. I
thanks
so
for
enjoyed having you.
Yeah.
You know, we know that the basis for a great garden always is good soil, and I guess you could really say that great soil is the building block to a great garden.
Oh gosh,
So,
yes.
Yes. So again, thank you for taking your time out today to be with us. And I hope that you have a successful gardening season.
Thanks, you too.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, so from all of us here at FCTV, thanks for joining us, and happy digging.